There is a type of strength in this world that does not announce itself when it enters the room. It doesn't try to outshine anyone or dominate conversations. It doesn't care for applause or recognition. This kind of strength is still, quiet, and unwavering. It belongs to those rare individuals who carry themselves with an aura of calm that you can't quite explain but can absolutely feel. They have nothing to prove, and yet their presence proves everything. Confidence in its highest form isn't about posture or tone or how many achievements someone can list. It is not about who can speak the loudest or command the most attention. True, unshakable confidence lives in the spaces between words, in the stillness between movements, in the kind of peace that no chaos can disturb. We are raised in a world that praises hustle, rewards noise, and often mistakes arrogance for certainty. We're told from a young age to stand tall, speak up, fight for space. And while some of those things are necessary, they are not the roots of real confidence. Real confidence is like a tree that grows downward before it ever reaches upward. It goes deep, quietly forming stability in places no one sees. There is a strength in the individual who no longer needs to prove their worth because they already know what it is. They're not seeking approval from strangers or applause from the crowd. Their validation comes from within, from an alignment between what they believe and how they live. They don't have to talk about their values. They live them, and because of that, they don't need to be loud to be heard. The most powerful people are not those who seek power, but those who have mastered themselves, and you can recognize them instantly. They are the ones who are calm in a crisis. They are the ones who don't react to every insult, every provocation, not because they are weak, but because they are so secure in who they are that the noise of the world cannot penetrate their peace. They don't fight unnecessary battles because they know their energy is sacred. They don't waste time proving their value to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. There is a quiet kind of dominance in those who have nothing to prove. They've already had the internal battles. They've already sat with their insecurities, confronted their fears, questioned their motives, and they came out the other side refined, not hardened, but strengthened. They don't need to be the loudest in the room because their peace is their power, and that peace speaks louder than words ever could. We live in a culture where performance is often mistaken for identity. We are taught to chase likes, followers, titles, and trophies, as if those things define who we are. But what happens when all of it is stripped away, when the spotlight fades, when the crowd disappears, when it's just you and your reflection? What's left? That's where true confidence begins. It begins when you can look at yourself, without performance, without image, and still feel whole. Inner calm is not something you can fake. It cannot be forced. It is not about suppressing emotion or pretending nothing affects you. It's about becoming so anchored in your truth that you no longer need the external world to confirm it. It is cultivated slowly, intentionally, in solitude. It grows through silence, reflection, and discipline. It's not about being emotionless, it's about being emotionally intelligent. When people carry true calm, they don't need to boast, they don't need to dominate. They listen more than they speak. And when they do speak, their words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they are honest, because they come from a place of depth, not desperation. They've done the work. They've built a foundation of character, not just charisma. And that's why people trust them, follow them, respect them, even if they don't always understand them. In a world that moves fast, the calm person is the one who slows things down. In a room full of noise, they create a pause. In a situation full of pressure, they bring clarity. Not because they are superhuman, but because they have learned to be present. They are not racing through life trying to win something. They are grounded in each moment, able to handle what comes with grace. This kind of calm cannot be stolen, not by chaos, not by conflict, not by criticism, because it isn't built on illusion, it's built on internal alignment. It's not tied to success or status, it's tied to truth. And the truth is, you don't need to perform to be enough. You don't need to compare to be worthy. You don't need to impress to be powerful. The most impressive thing about a truly confident person is not their resume, not their voice, not their network. It's their ability to remain the same in every room they walk into. They don't change depending on who's around. They don't shrink for approval or expand for attention. They show up exactly as they are, consistently, authentically, and unapologetically. And what's more, their calm becomes contagious. It invites others to do the same. When you encounter someone like this, you feel it. You don't just hear their words, you feel their energy. You feel safe, you feel seen, you feel like you don't have to try so hard. Because in their presence, you're reminded that being enough was never about being perfect. It was about being present, being true, being whole. We need more of that in this world. We need more people who have learned that peace is not a passive state. It is an active decision, a decision to let go of the noise, to release the need for control, to trust that who you are is already more than enough. It's a decision to stop chasing and start becoming. Becoming calm does not mean becoming complacent. It means learning to operate from a place of centered strength, not reactive energy. It means knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to act and when to be still, when to stand firm and when to walk away. And perhaps the most powerful thing about this kind of calm is that it cannot be manufactured overnight. It is forged through fire, through loss, through seasons of confusion and nights of questioning. It is the reward of choosing growth over comfort, clarity over chaos, and purpose over popularity. You can always tell who's done the work. They don't walk around demanding attention. They simply attract it. Not with ego, but with essence. Not with force, but with presence. Because their calm tells you they've been through the storm and they've come out stronger, not scarred. So if you are searching for confidence, don't start by changing how you look, how you speak, or how you perform. Start by going inward. Start by listening to the parts of you that you've silenced. Start by healing the areas where you feel unworthy. And most importantly, start by accepting that you don't need to earn your worth. It already exists. Confidence is not found in becoming someone else. It is found in embracing who you've always been. It is found in remembering that your value is not up for debate, that your power lies not in how much you can do, but in how deeply you can be. Be present, be grounded, be real. The world may try to convince you otherwise. It may tell you to be louder, faster, more visible, but remember this, the strongest trees do not tremble in the wind because their roots are deep, and your confidence can be the same, not built on sand, but on stone, not built on image, but on identity. Let your calm be your rebellion, let your peace be your proof, let your stillness be your strength. Because when you finally let go of needing to be seen, that's when people truly begin to see you. When you stop trying to prove you belong, that's when you truly arrive. And when you stop shouting your worth, your very presence begins to speak louder than words ever could. You have nothing to prove, not because you are better than others, but because you are finally better than the version of yourself that once thought you had to be anyone else. Walk into every room with the quiet knowledge that you are whole, not because of what you carry, but because of who you are. And in that calm, in that stillness, you will find the most powerful trait of all, the confidence to simply be. There is something profoundly powerful about the kind of person who does not need the world to notice them to feel significant. The person who walks into a room and does not compete, does not dominate, does not seek to be the center, yet everyone still senses them. That kind of presence, the one built on silent certainty, carries more gravity than all the noise combined. It does not demand to be heard. It simply is, solid, whole, enough. We are taught from a young age to seek affirmation, smile for the camera, earn the trophy, get the applause, be liked, be seen, be recognized. But the truth is, the most confident people in the world don't live to be seen. They are not addicted to applause, and they are not performing for approval. Their confidence is not attached to how others react to them. It's rooted in something deeper, something that remains unshaken, even in silence. True confidence doesn't broadcast itself. It's not showy. It's not wrapped in flashy words or grand gestures. It doesn't need to convince anyone. It doesn't even need to be validated. It exists, quietly, in how you carry yourself when no one's watching, in how you respond when things don't go your way, in how you hold steady when everything around you is unstable. That is the mark of real confidence, when nothing external has the power to disrupt your internal state. Silent certainty is not passive. It's not the absence of energy, it's the presence of clarity. It is the unwavering belief that you are enough, that your worth is not for sale, that your value is not a result of other people's opinions. The truly confident don't need others to see their strength. They live from it. And that's what makes them different. They don't seek permission to exist. They don't look around for validation. They walk their path because they know it's theirs. This kind of confidence is not noisy because it doesn't come from ego, it comes from essence. Ego needs to be seen, ego needs to be clapped for, ego is constantly starving, but essence is fed from within, it's content in silence. It doesn't chase anything because it doesn't feel lacking. Silent certainty doesn't need to convince others, it's already convinced. That's why it's powerful, that's why it's rare. You can see it in how someone holds a conversation, not to dominate it, but to be fully present in it. You can hear it in their voice, not because it's loud, but because it's stable. You can feel it in their choices, not because they follow the crowd, but because they follow conviction. Silent certainty is the trait of a person who has gone to war within themselves and come out with peace. Not because life gave them all the answers, but because they learned to be okay without needing them all. In a world obsessed with being noticed, being followed, being praised, there's something radical about a person who no longer needs any of it, the one who wakes up and lives their truth without turning it into a spectacle, who gives generously without broadcasting their kindness, who endures quietly without asking for pity. That is the kind of confidence that shifts atmospheres. Not because it's attention-grabbing, but because it's authentic. This confidence doesn't flinch in failure, it doesn't collapse under criticism, it doesn't inflate with compliments, because it's not based on circumstance, it's based on character. It is the result of choosing integrity over image again and again. It's knowing that you're not here to impress, you're here to impact. And impact isn't always visible. Sometimes the most powerful ripples begin in silence, in unseen places, in quiet acts of courage no one will ever know about. Silent certainty means you don't speak just to be heard. You speak because you have something real to say. You don't move just to be seen, you move with purpose. And when you're still, that stillness isn't absence, it's depth. It's knowing who you are and not needing to shout it from the rooftops. The person who possesses silent certainty does not fear rejection. They know that rejection doesn't reduce them. They don't panic when someone misunderstands them because their identity doesn't hang in the balance. They don't manipulate situations to be liked. They don't bend their values just to gain approval, because deep down they are anchored in something that external praise can't enhance and external criticism can't erase. Imagine walking through life like that. Imagine showing up to work, to relationships, to challenges, not with performance, but with presence, not with the exhausting pressure to prove something, but with the quiet confidence that you already are something, not defined by your title or your social media metrics, but defined by the consistency of your soul. That is what silent certainty offers. Not a life free of trouble, but a life free from the need to constantly perform. It is not a coincidence that the people we often trust the most aren't the loudest. They're the ones who consistently show up, who don't need credit for every effort, who are steady even when others fluctuate. Their power is in their dependability, their alignment, their restraint. They don't speak to compete, they speak to contribute. They don't show up to dominate, they show up to serve. And because of that, they lead without forcing leadership. They influence without chasing influence. Silent certainty grows when you begin to understand that you were never supposed to be everyone's favorite. That not everyone is meant to understand you, and that's okay. The moment you stop tailoring your life to fit the expectations of others is the moment you start living from truth. And from truth comes confidence, not the counterfeit kind that requires applause, but the kind that holds its ground in silence. Confidence doesn't mean you're always right. It doesn't mean you never question yourself. It means you're willing to stand firm even in uncertainty because you trust your core, you trust your process, you trust the growth that's happening inside of you. Silent certainty whispers, I may not be where I want to be yet, but I'm not pretending anymore. I'm rooted. I'm present. I'm enough. This is not easy. It requires an unlearning of everything the world tells you about success. It means walking away from the addiction to being seen, liked, or praised. It means letting go of the need to constantly explain yourself, defend yourself, or showcase yourself. It's choosing a life where your peace matters more than your image, where your depth matters more than your display. And while this path may seem quiet, it is far from weak. In fact, it takes more strength to be silent in your confidence than to beg for affirmation. It takes more courage to stay true in the shadows than to perform in the spotlight. It takes more power to be gentle, more maturity to be still, more authenticity to be unknown and at peace than to be known and exhausted. The truly confident are the ones who don't need to remind others of their value. They simply live it. They show it. They embody it. And even if the world doesn't give them a standing ovation, they rest easy because they weren't performing in the first place. They were living with intention. And intention, not applause, is what gives life real weight. So if you find yourself constantly needing validation, constantly chasing recognition, constantly trying to prove that you matter, pause. Ask yourself, what if I already do? What if the pursuit of being seen has distracted me from simply being? What if the real power isn't in being known, but in knowing myself? The confidence you're looking for doesn't come from louder voices or bigger stages. It comes from quiet alignment, from showing up every day with integrity, from doing the hard work when no one is watching, from choosing honesty when pretending would be easier, from building trust with yourself. That's where silent certainty is born. When you have it, you walk differently, not arrogantly, but purposefully. You speak differently, not to impress, but to connect. You think differently, not with anxiety, but with awareness. And people will notice, not because you asked them to, but because something real always stands out, even in silence. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who are sure, sure of who they are, sure of what they value, sure of what they're becoming, not in a boastful way, but in a deeply grounded, fiercely humble way. Because when you carry that kind of certainty, you don't need to shout it, you don't need to prove it, you just live it. And that's what the most confident people do. They live, not for the camera, not for the crowd, but for the calling, for the cause, for the character they're committed to becoming. And that journey, though often quiet, echoes louder than any applause ever could. You have that within you. Not the need to perform, not the pressure to prove, but the invitation to return to that place where you know who you are, where you no longer look outward for answers, but inward for alignment. And when you live from that place, you won't need to be loud to be powerful. You won't need to be seen to have significance. You'll just need to be you, fully, calmly, confidently. That is silent certainty. And it is more powerful than the world can measure. Would you like the next version on rooted identity, also expanded to 3,000 words with the same structure? Or would you like a YouTube-ready package of this version? Certainly. Below is a 3,000-word motivational speech centered around rooted identity, a self-worth built on values, not validation. As requested, it contains no headings, flows seamlessly, and does not interrupt the message with any section titles or labels. There comes a moment in every person's life when the masks begin to feel too heavy, the applause starts to sound hollow, and the constant chase for recognition no longer feels like a pursuit of purpose, but a desperate scramble to be enough. It is in that moment that a quiet voice begins to whisper from within, a voice that asks, "Who are you, really?" Not who they expect, not who they follow, not who they admire, but you, in your rawest, most honest form. That voice is the beginning of something powerful. It is the beginning of a rooted identity. You see, in this world where value is often measured by visibility, we are tempted to believe that self-worth must be earned through performance. We are conditioned to seek validation like oxygen, as if we might disappear without it. We scroll through filtered lives, curated moments, and surface-level affirmations, and we forget that the most real parts of us are the ones no one sees. But a rooted identity does not bloom from external applause. It grows in the deep soil of values, in the quiet, in the unseen, in the places that cannot be liked or shared or trending. To live with a rooted identity is to understand that who you are is not up for debate. It is not swayed by the opinions of others or altered by the highs and lows of public opinion. It means knowing that your value does not fluctuate with your circumstances. When you are rooted, you are unshaken, not because life is easy, but because your worth is not dependent on how easy life feels. You stop trying to impress and start trying to impact. You stop asking who will love you if you fail and start asking who you're becoming regardless of failure. There is a unique strength in a person who has done the work to understand their identity beyond the surface. This person knows where they stand. They are not driven by every trend or tossed by every wave. Their yes means yes. Their no means no. They don't adapt their values to fit the room. They bring their values into the room. And even if those values cost them popularity, they remain unshaken because they know what they stand for. And more importantly, they know who they are when everything else is stripped away. Validation is addictive because it's immediate, a compliment, a like, a cheer, but it fades quickly. It leaves you hungry for more. It teaches you to rely on external noise to silence your internal questions. And over time, that reliance weakens you because you lose your center. You start living for approval instead of living from purpose. But when you are rooted, when your identity comes from your deepest values, kindness, truth, resilience, faith, courage, then validation becomes optional, not essential. A tree does not panic when the storm comes. It does not scream for help or beg for calm. It simply stands because it is rooted, and you too can become like that, unmoved, not because you're invincible, but because you are anchored in something deeper than the wind. When your identity is rooted, failure doesn't define you. It informs you. Rejection doesn't destroy you. It redirects you. Criticism doesn't cripple you. It refines you. And success, it no longer controls you. It simply becomes one more chapter in a story that was never about proving anything in the first place. You begin to live with integrity because your actions align with your values, not just in public but in private, not just when it's easy, but when it's costly. You stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "Is this who I am?" That question becomes your compass. That question becomes your filter. That question becomes your foundation. And in time, something miraculous happens. You stop performing. You start breathing. You stop comparing. You start creating. You stop hiding. You start healing. Because you realize that you don't have to earn identity. You only have to uncover it. Peel back the layers. Silence the noise. Go beneath the expectations and discover that the real you has been there all along, waiting to be known, not by others, but by you. This rooted identity doesn't just change how you see yourself. It changes how you move through the world. You begin to lead with empathy instead of ego. You begin to speak with clarity instead of control. You begin to love with strength instead of fear. Because you're no longer using people to validate your identity, you're serving people from a place of wholeness. And even when life gets hard, and it will, you are not shaken, because you know that the storm is not stronger than your roots. People may misunderstand you, they may question your choices, they may walk away, But none of that changes your value because you've stopped outsourcing your worth. You've brought it home. You've planted it deep. You've said to the world, I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to be it. This isn't arrogance. This is alignment. Arrogance says, I'm better than you. Alignment says, I don't need to compare to you. Rooted identity removes the toxic competition from your spirit. It removes the fear of being overlooked. It removes the obsession with being the best and replaces it with the desire to be your best. Because when you're rooted, you understand something powerful. You are not in this world to be impressive. You are in this world to be impactful, and impact is not always visible. Sometimes it's in the small decisions, the quiet integrity, the unseen sacrifice, the patient love. These are not always celebrated, but they are deeply powerful, and they shape the world far more than the spotlight ever will. Your values are what ground you. They are what bring you back when you drift. They are what protect you from becoming a version of yourself that looks successful but feels hollow. And when you live by those values, even when no one's watching, even when no one claps, you begin to build something no storm can destroy. You begin to build a legacy. And that legacy does not begin in public. It begins in the secret place, in the quiet decisions, in the moments where no one sees, but you know, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is how I choose to live, regardless of who's applauding. You begin to love the person you are becoming, not because you've arrived, but because you're honest, because you're trying, because you're growing in alignment with truth. That kind of self-respect cannot be bought. It cannot be faked. It is earned in silence. And it shows up in confidence. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that walks peacefully, humbly, and unshaken. People around you will feel the difference. They may not know what it is, but they will feel it. They will trust you, not because you say the right things, but because you are the right thing. You are consistent. You are authentic. You are real. And in a world starved for authenticity, that realness will echo louder than any shout. So let others chase applause. Let others build their worth on being followed. You build yours on being faithful, faithful to your values, faithful to your purpose, faithful to your truth, because that is the only foundation strong enough to carry the weight of a meaningful life. You were not born to be defined by the crowd. You were born to define the path, and that path, the one only you can walk, requires courage. It requires self-reflection. It requires letting go of everything that was built just to impress and embracing everything that was born to impact. In a world that constantly demands we become something, there is a silent and often painful struggle that goes unnoticed. It is the quiet confusion of those who have spent their lives being shaped by the hands of expectation, molded by the opinions of others, and worn thin by the weight of performance. It's the internal exhaustion that arises from trying to be seen, loved, accepted, and applauded, not for who we are, but for who we've been told to be. And somewhere in that race to be enough, many of us lose something far more precious than applause. We lose ourselves. There is nothing more powerful than a person who has reclaimed their identity from the world, a person who no longer allows temporary praise to dictate their permanent value, a person who knows exactly who they are, not because someone told them, but because they took the time to find out. This journey towards self-understanding is not a loud one. It doesn't start on a stage. It starts in silence, in the mirror, in the still moments of truth when you begin asking real questions. Who am I when no one is clapping? Who am I when I stop performing? Who am I when I am alone, without a filter, without applause? Rooted identity is not something you stumble upon, it's something you fight for, because the world doesn't hand it to you. It hands you scripts, it hands you labels, it hands you pressure and pre-written paths that promise success as long as you stay inside the lines. And the moment you step outside of them, people start asking, what happened to you? But what they don't realize is that what happened wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. You stopped living by default and started living by design. You began replacing noise with meaning. You began shedding layers that never fit you. You stopped chasing validation and you started chasing values. When your identity is rooted in values, your life becomes unshakable. Because values don't change with trends, they don't shift with public opinion, they don't weaken when storms come. They are deep, foundational, and unwavering. They hold you steady when life doesn't go your way. They guide your decisions when everyone is giving you different advice. They protect your peace when the world tries to pull you in every direction. When you live by values, you stop looking outward for permission to live. You start looking inward for purpose. Rooted identity means you no longer perform to be accepted. You no longer hustle for worthiness. You are no longer addicted to being liked. Because you understand that likes don't define you. You understand that applause is temporary and image is fleeting. You begin to prioritize being real over being popular. And when that shift happens, you find something more powerful than the attention of others. You find the freedom to finally be yourself. The people who change the world are not always the loudest, they're not always the most followed, but they are always the most rooted, because from that rooted place, they live, speak, and act with unwavering conviction. They build things that last. Relationships, careers, movements, all built not on shifting sands, but on deep values. You can feel the difference when someone is living from that kind of authenticity. They carry a quiet confidence, a peaceful strength. They don't need to prove who they are. They just are. Rooted identity also brings clarity. When you know who you are, you also know who you're not. And that clarity is a filter that protects you. It keeps you from saying yes when your heart says no. It keeps you from watering yourself down just to be digestible. It keeps you from becoming a copy when you were born to be an original. You start showing up differently, not arrogantly, but assuredly. Not seeking attention, but creating impact. And the most beautiful thing about rooted identity is that it allows you to grow, because when your roots are strong, you are not afraid to evolve. You can stretch, expand, change your mind, and even fail, because your identity isn't tied to your performance. You are allowed to be human. You are allowed to struggle. You are allowed to not have it all figured out. And still, you remain enough. Still, you remain whole. That is the power of identity that is built on truth instead of applause. For many people, the greatest battle is not against others. It's against the voice in their head that keeps saying, "You're not enough unless they say you are." But let me tell you something with absolute certainty. You are enough, even if no one claps. You are enough, even if no one validates your journey. You are enough because your worth was never a popularity contest. It was a birthright. You don't have to audition for your own life. You just have to live it, fully and honestly. Living from a rooted identity is also how you become a leader, not a leader who barks orders or demands attention, but a leader who inspires by example, because people follow clarity, they follow consistency, they follow those who don't just talk about values, but live them. Every time you choose honesty over convenience, every time you choose courage over comfort, every time you choose to be who you are rather than what others expect, you are leading. You are showing others that it's possible to be whole in a fractured world. Rooted identity doesn't isolate you from others. It deepens your connection with them, because when you're no longer trying to impress, you can truly connect. You begin to see people not as competitors, but as companions. You stop comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. You stop needing to be the best in the room and start striving to be the truest version of yourself in any room. That shift doesn't just change your life, it liberates it. There's a kind of peace that comes when you're no longer negotiating your worth, when you stop adjusting your personality for acceptance, when you stop silencing your voice just to be liked. That peace is priceless. It allows you to dream bigger, to love deeper, to live braver. It gives you space to heal, to build, to become, and from that space, your true potential begins to emerge, not the potential to be liked by everyone, but the potential to become someone who no longer needs to be. You don't need to be a chameleon to be accepted. You don't need to constantly perform to be loved. What you need is to be deeply aligned with your values. Because when your identity is rooted in things that don't change, like love, integrity, courage, wisdom, kindness, then you can walk through the seasons of life without being shaken. You can handle success without arrogance. You can handle failure without falling apart. Because your identity is not at the mercy of outcomes. It is grounded, it is secure. Rooted identity is what gives birth to purpose. Because when you know who you are, you begin to understand what you're here to do, and when your purpose is connected to your values, it becomes unstoppable. It's no longer about doing something just to gain attention. It's about doing something because it's who you are, because it matters, because it aligns. That kind of purpose can weather any storm. That kind of purpose doesn't burn out, it burns brighter. And perhaps the most important truth is this: rooted identity cannot be borrowed, it cannot be copied, it must be built. And that building takes time, it takes reflection, it takes confronting the parts of yourself that you've ignored, hidden, or rejected. But when you begin that work, when you start choosing self-respect over self-doubt, honesty over image, depth over display, you will discover a strength within you that no one can take away. This journey is not for the faint of heart, but it is for the brave who are tired of pretending, the brave who are done performing, the brave who are ready to stop asking for permission and start taking up space, not from ego, but from authenticity. You don't have to be perfect to start. You just have to be willing to dig deep, willing to let go of false identities, willing to trust that what's real in you is enough. You were never meant to be anyone else. You were never meant to live a copy-paste life. You were meant to live boldly, honestly, and freely. And the key to that life is not out there. It's already within you. It's in your roots. It's in your truth. It's in the decision you make right now to stop chasing applause and start standing on values. So when the world gets loud, go inward. When the pressure to perform returns, get still. When the temptation to compare shows up, remember, your race is not their race. Your identity is not their opinion. Your worth is not their approval. You are already valuable. You are already worthy. You are already enough. Let this be the moment you stop being a stranger to yourself. Let this be the moment you come home, not to what's trendy, but to what's true, to what lasts, to what grounds you when everything else shifts. Because when your identity is rooted in values, you become unshakable. And that kind of life is the most powerful kind there is.